Can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat Sleep Boxing Repeat.
Welcome to another Big Fight Breakdown on ESBR's YouTube channel. This is part two of the Big Fight Breakdown between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. The rematch takes place on November 15th at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Elliot, Danny, good to be joined by both of you again. Couple of points here, then we'll move on to our all-important predictions. So really looking forward to hearing what both of you have got to say. Danny, when it's all kind of said and done with both of their careers, who do you think is going to be remembered as the biggest legend in British boxing? We've seen Chris Eubank Jr., who's quite possibly past his best. We've seen him in some big fights. He's not won that world title, but we've seen him in some big fights over the years. And I'm kind of asking you to look into the future here because we don't know what Conor Benn's going to achieve. Conor Benn might be at his peak now, but whether he wins the world title or not, we don't know. What weight class he's going to operate in the next few years, we don't know that either. It could be 147, 154, 160. But kind of when it's all said and done, who's going to be the same as their fathers? Who's going to be looked at as kind of the bigger legend, the bigger name in the sport?
I think legends, a bit generous for either of them, to be honest. Difficult because Eubank, it's only now and sort of since this Ben saga that he's turned from that pantomime villain to a figure who British fight fans and casual sport fans really love. That storyline with the father will be remembered. I went on to look the other day, and the ring walk footage has got millions of views. The footage of the dad first arriving has got millions and millions of views. And I remember on the night, the amount of texts I was getting from not even just friends who are sports fans, but my mum, my granny, they were all in some way, shape, or form keeping tabs on it. And that will leave a lasting imprint. And I think the Eubank name will always hold that bit more weight than the Ben name. I think now Conor Benn could go on and blow Chris Eubank Jr.'s achievements in a boxing ring out of the water. Potentially could become a world champion. I'm not sure. I think it's not beyond the realms of possibility, but he would need a favourable matchup. And to be fair, there maybe are some favourable world title shots available, certainly down at welterweight. But would one world title be enough to surpass Eubank's legacy? Eubank, as well as that, has had to host a big nights. The Liam Smith saga was very big. They were both big pay-per-view fights. The World Boxing Super Series, this, of course, and Liam Williams headlining. He's had a much longer career, obviously, but much more big nights. Conor Benn's only big night so far is the Eubank night, and Eubank's had 10 of them. So Ben has a way to go to catch him. It'll be interesting to see, depending on the result of this fight, how big a star Ben is. Is he big enough to headline a pay-per-view on his own back at some point in the future? Remains to be seen. But at the minute, if you're asking me, I think Eubank will go down as the bigger name, as the more fondly remembered. I don't know if Ben will ever be able to win the PR war over British fight fans. To be honest with you, I think it's a battle they're trying very hard to do in numerous sort of forms. But if you're asking me, I'll say Eubank right now.
Yeah, and I think for one reason or another, I think when it comes to the fathers, I just think that senior is significantly kind of more famous to the general British public. And that could have been because of his personality. Look, obviously he's the one who's got a win in that rivalry, as does Eubank Jr. now, and he's been around for longer as well. But Elliot, in the future, who's going to be kind of put in the higher regards, I suppose is one way of putting who's going to be more respected by British boxing fans when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of points that Danny said there. I'm not going to try and duplicate them. Apologies if I do, but I think Eubank first and foremost. I think Danny's right as well. I don't think the word legend can be used about either of these guys, even though the names are obviously legendary. I think Eubank name's big just off the father as well. Obviously, the monocle, the sheriff stuff, pure showman. I think Junior, to be fair to him, has had some very big nights as well. Like Danny mentioned, some of those events there. And obviously the WBSS, almost like his career's almost gone in like two or three phases almost. It seems like quite a long time ago, that WBSS, but you're like in with some really credible names as well. Had some very big nights. I think if I talk about Conor Benn, whilst there's time obviously for Conor Benn to come and like eclipse obviously the achievements of Eubank Jr., I feel like that controversy around the eggs, the controversy around all those sort of, those failed tests, etc., have actually had such a negative effect because it almost went into the mainstream. Hearn like battling Jordan on Talksport, Mail, all these like different places. Like it really crept into the mainstream. It wasn't just a case of like you can have a silent ban, whatever. It was like people were talking about that in a really negative sense that wouldn't even really know much about boxing. So I think when you talk about what would he have to do to almost turn that tide to be thought of as favourite, I don't necessarily think even one world title, like Danny said, I don't think one world title would do it. If you managed to get a title against the likes of, like a Barrios or a Croc or whatever, I don't think that would actually turn the tide at all. I think you'd almost need maybe sort of like a run of say like five really solid opponents and really sort of showcase himself as being like that level of sort of fighter, which I don't think he actually is. So I feel like in a way they're both got the same issue really. They're both not, to my mind, going to be able to eclipse what their dad's achieved. And I think the fact that Eubank Senior was just pure entertainment, whilst actually also being hard as nails and a world champion, means that that name will live on, and that Eubank Junior, from what he's achieved, the names he's been in with, will also be able to carry that probably a little bit more than Conor Benn's be able to carry the Benn surname. As harsh as that sounds, I just think, yeah, Eubank for me.
You're on mute, Starry.
Apologies. We'll start that one again. I think just to add on to what both of you have said, I think another factor here is Conor, Chris Eubank Jr. is like the biggest fight of his career was this year at the age of 35. Conor Benn, the biggest fight of his career was this year at the age of 28. What can Conor do in the future? What can Conor Benn do in the future that's going to be as big or bigger in a fight that he could possibly win as well? I'm not sure. Like obviously, look, he was to move to 147 and fight Lewis Crocker next year. Of course, that's a big fight. Is it bigger than Eubank? Then no. If he was to fight, I don't know, an American kind of one of the big American fighters, Jaron Ennis, Devin Haney, would that be a big fight? Yes. Is he going to win that fight? No. And I think my other worry about Conor Benn is he kind of, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but basically turns into a bit of a serial loser, and he keeps on being in kind of big fights up to a point, but just does keep losing them because he's not on the same level as a lot of those guys. But we'll see. I hope he's got a lot left in the next couple of years. This leads us on to the kind of final point of this big fight breakdown. If you're enjoying this video, please do check out part one. By the way, this is part two. Part one should already be out. It will be in the link in the description, so please do click on that of this video. Danny, I'll cross over to you. What do you see both fighters doing next? And I want to ask this in terms of if Chris Eubank Jr. wins, what does he do next? If he loses, what does he do next? And the same with Conor Benn, please. I've got my own suggestions, but I'll hand things over to you.
I think if Chris Eubank Jr. is to win the fight and it becomes 2-0, I think he will carry on. Eubank loves the pound note. His star power will be bigger than ever. And I could see him moving up to 168 and fighting Canelo if that was to happen. I don't think Canelo's maybe got as much ambition as he once did. I don't know if the idea of starting all over again and picking up vacant titles and trying to become undisputed at 168 is something to be too interested in at this stage. I think the Eubank fight, probably the biggest one that I'd be interested in. So I could see that if Eubank was to win, that'd be a massive fight. I'd love to see that at Wembley. It'd be great to have Canelo over here. And following on from that, if Benn was to lose, it's no disaster, is it? Move back down and weight. Hopefully he can still make 147 well, because I think that's where there is potential success for him. I don't see any route to a world title for him at 154, and even fights just below those world championship fights are really tough for him. Even, Jaron Ennis and Virgil Ortiz haven't got a world title at 154, so it's a really tough division. But you mentioned the Lewis Crocker fight. Would love to see that. That'd be a big fight. Barrios, they'll view as potentially the most winnable one. And as you say, you're right. So Benn can walk into all these big fights, but it's just how much success can he have in them. I would like to see him move down to 147 and not even necessarily go straight into a world title fight. I mean, does he deserve one? 2 defeats at 160, his best win at 147, still very much over the hill, Chris Algieri. So I would like to fight a top 10 welterweight first and go into a world title shot. Is that going to happen? No, we'll walk straight into a world title fight, obviously. The biggest name in the division outside maybe Devin Haney, who's of course fighting there for the first time in a couple of weeks. But yeah, and then roles reverse. I think if Benn wins, no matter what shape it is, we're going to see the trilogy. 100% that'll happen.
Yeah, no, of course. I think it'll be interesting to see if Benn wins what the trilogy looks like as well. If a fight is signed again for 160, or if kind of Eubank basically refuses to fight again, without the weight limit being higher. Do you give him how much of a chance do you give Chris Eubank Jr. against Canelo, Danny?
Slightly more than I did pre-Crawford, but still not much, to be honest. I think Canelo didn't look that bad against Crawford. He came up against an elite fighter in Terence Crawford and had success. Definitely didn't look as poor as he did against William Skull, and it wasn't a fight he shipped loads of punishment in. And I think even though Eubank will be a better version of himself up at 168, you still got to make Canelo a very healthy favorite against them.
Yeah, no, we'll see. Look, that fight's been spoken about by Eubank for a few years now, so we shall see. Elliot, we'll hand things over to you now. Chris Eubank, Chris Eubank Jr. loses and Conor Benn wins, as Danny said. A trilogy will be on the card. So I'll ask you if Chris Eubank Jr. wins, what do you think he will? What do you see him do next? Do you see the Canelo fight happening? Do you see kind of another route? I think Eubank he's maybe not got too much time on his hands after this fight, so he might just kind of want big fights only. What do you see happening if Chris Eubank Jr. wins?
Yeah, I mean, like Chris Hughes obviously had quite a long career. I think the size of these events, both these Ben events, are going to be big. So I think for me, it's almost like I think he will carry on. I think it'll be a case for me of picking events, picking names. It will have to be something along the size of that Canelo fight, I think. And I think, to be honest with you, I actually think that fight works out well for both parties for the reasons outlined as well. I think Canelo would win it. I also think it might be nice. I don't know where they'd stage it necessarily, but if you had like a really card that happened in London, happened in Wembley, like you say, that'd be a great chance for Canelo to fight in the UK. I think I'd make him fairly strong favourite against Eubank, especially Eubank would have been depleted now in those weight cuts that he's had. Tough fights. I think Canelo still have too much for him. So I actually think that is the fight to make, actually. And I think that would also give Eubank something enough to get up for and want to be a part of. And also for Canelo, I think it would suit everyone. So yeah, I do actually see that fight happening. If he wins this, I agree with Danny. I do see that fight happening next.
Yeah, I think we're all we're just kind of agreeing with each other. I just think that fight makes sense. It's a very winnable fight for Canelo, and it's a very big fight for Chris Eubank Jr. So I just think it ticks, and it's at 168, which is the weight that Chris Eubank Jr. should probably be at now. So I feel like that ticks all the boxes. I think Elliot, you made a good point. It's maybe just a case of where would that fight be? Would it be Vegas, London, Saudi Arabia, Mexico? We'll see. But that could be a fight. But Chris Eubank Jr. has to win this fight first. What about Conor Benn? If he wins, obviously we expect to see a trilogy. But if he loses, what do you think's going to happen next? I feel like there's so many different fights that could happen for him.
Yeah, I agree with Danny in the sense that I agree with Danny on both points. I agree with Danny on the fact that Conor Benn will walk in probably to a massive fight just from the sort of backing that he has and the sort of promotional backing he has and the money that he brings. But I also agree with Danny that he should probably drop down a level and if he has 2 losses here, essentially just sort of build a little bit. I mean, you look at his CV, like you say, it's very, very light. Some of that was, through the sort of egg period. So there's question marks on it as well. So I feel like actually in some ways just kind of like take a bit of a breather and try and, put some performances together and come again. But to be honest with you, I could see him fighting Barris, see him fighting Crocker. And a weird name I'll put in there, I could even see him fighting someone like Manny Pacquiao. To be honest with you, I could see that fight. I see something outrageous like that happening. And then you're just sort of going, okay, here's Conor Benn again. He's starched a 47-year-old Manny Pacquiao, or maybe gone points with a 47-year-old Manny Pacquiao. So I can see it being like almost again, he's not going to want to. So I think once you get to these like events at this size, it must be hard to drop down on the event sort of status. So it's almost like who's going to give me the name that's going to propel me to that sort of event. Not saying it's almost like the Jake Paul blueprint in a way when you get to that sort of WWE kind of event. So yeah, I think it'll be possibly one of those 3 names. But I do agree with Danny. I do think he should drop down and actually kind of like get some more credible wins essentially and like kind of rebuild if he does lose here.
Yeah, I've got an idea, Alex. I really want to get your opinion on this because I know you've been voting against this guy. A fight that's been spoken about a lot. Last year's a good domestic rivalry. What do you think about a fight against Josh Kelly? Would that fight excite you at all?
It would excite me actually. I've been on this channel many times, been quite critical of Josh Kelly, but he's put together a couple of wins that surprised me. The Troy Williamson one being the main one. I actually still think I'd favour Josh Kelly to win that. I really would. I just feel like I don't think I could sit here and make a credible argument looking at the names and the performances that Conor Benn's put in, especially kind of, again, I don't want to keep making a reference to it, but without some of the sort of substances he was accused of taking, I think Josh Kelly, that's a winnable fight for Josh Kelly. I don't think Conor Benn's got obviously the power that he had when he was in that period either. So I think Kelly points is how I'll actually look at that, to be honest with you.
We'll see. I think that fight's still there. Josh Kelly, look, expected to possibly fight for world title next. The fight's expected to lose, but that could still be it's a winnable fight for Conor Benn. That's one thing I would say. And some of these other fights have been spoken about. I don't think they are particularly winnable. All right, chaps, we'll end things here. Looking forward to some predictions as always. We're doing this raw. This isn't kind of rehearsed. I hope no one's reading off a script, but so we'll do some predictions. Danny, I'm going to go to you first because I know, hate to bring it up, but you did go for Conor Benn the first time round. I do keep my receipts. What are you going for this time? You going for repeat Chris Eubank Jr. win, or are you going for revenge? Let us know.
I think Ben's going to beat him. I think, look, how depleted Eubank was that first time, and I mentioned in part one the occasions Benn had him staggered, and just making that weight again and that rehydration clause again, the effects of that first fight, the fact Conor Benn is the younger fighter, the less experienced fighter, will come on for those 12 rounds more than Eubank. You would have thought Eubank hospitalized for 3 days. I just think the scale might have tipped in Benn's favour. That's exactly my logic for the first time, and it was proved wrong. But I don't think it was a million miles off of Ben's stoppage at a couple of occasions in that fight. Never had him all over the place, but certainly Eubank was clearly affected by the shots. And yeah, as I say, just the conditions of the fight, I think, don't favour Eubank at all. I think Ben will have had more time to make proper preparation with the fact he wasn't in hospital for 3 days. They won't be as concerned about getting him back into the gym as they will Eubank. And yeah, I'm going to go for a Conor Benn stoppage.
Yeah. I think another fact about the first fight, Conor Benn, he'd been out the ring for nearly 15 months. That's a long old time. He'd been used to being inactive due to the ongoing failed drugs situation. So maybe he's just used to not fighting that much. But that's kind of another factor here. How rusty was Ben in that first fight, as well as the fact, let's not forget, like, it wasn't kind of a whitewash. The first fight, I would say it was a fairly close fight, but it was at the same time, it was still quite clear who won that fight. All three judges had the same scorecard. Elliot, we'll go to you next. Danny is going for Conor Benn. Who are you going for?
Yeah, tough. I'm not reading off a script here, so this is going to be all on the mic in one take. But I think, I think Eubank for me is obviously the better fighter. I think you made a very, very good point actually earlier in the video though about whether the first performance could be just that one fight, that one night where kind of Eubank kind of brings it together in the sense that he was obviously biting down the gum. She was obviously very, very depleted, and whether that just mentally took so much out of him to get to the end of that, whether that was essentially too much for him then to sort of come again. I also wonder, to be honest with you, if it's close. As in closer than last time, will they just give it Ben? Will they lean Ben? You can't rule that out either. Obviously, there's a lot more future in Conor Benn, frankly, than there is in Eubank. So if it's tight, will it go that way? I think all things being fair, and if Eubank can kind of prepare better, and maybe obviously knows what's needed, but maybe he's got a bit of a longer lead time, and maybe we can tweak it somehow. Can he make it slightly better than he did the first time? I'm going to lean towards Eubank. I'm going to lean towards Eubank there, just on the fact that I think. He was so depleted last time and still managed to get it done. But I would like to see a Eubank stoppage late, but I actually got a feeling they might go points again.
Yeah, and when you say points, are we talking like razor thin? Are we talking about like similar scorecards to last time, wider, closer?
I think he'd have to win 8 rounds convincingly to even sort of get a 7-5. I think he'll have to it'll be kind of leaning that way for me. I think if he can win, I think it'll be sort of 8-4, 7-5 on the cards. I don't think it'll be daylight, put it that way.
Yeah.
I could even maybe see it being a split or like a majority. I really could see it. Just to give Conor Benn an opportunity to come again, frankly, or the loser the chance to come again. You've seen that quite a few on some of these cards where they're to be wider than they are, but the people obviously sometimes the decisions are right, but they're close, and people sort of come again and kind of hold on to that sort of close cards. I think it'd be a close card either way.
Be close, could be close. All right, chaps. I think, yeah, it's a tough one to predict. You're obviously disagreeing with who you think is going to win this fight. When their fathers rematched in 1993, the fight was given as a draw, and I'm picking for history to repeat itself. I know what both of you might say. I'm not bottling it. That's my general prediction. Not saying
as in repeating your own words back to you by suggesting that you may be bottling it.
But I think that the first fight, I thought all three scorecards were fair, 116, 112. I think that Eubank will be further depleted, and Conor Benn is more used to the weight, won't be as rusty. So I think it'll be so close the judges won't be able to split them. Whether that leads to a trilogy or not, I don't know, but that's my prediction. So after
Had to pick a winner, Elliot. If you had to pick a winner, what way would you go?
if I had to pick, if you were putting a gun to my head, Danny, and I had to pick a winner, I would go for Eubank. I would go for Eubank on points in a razor close decision, which could be controversial, basically. If I'm being honest, I think he might just do enough. However, I'm giving it a draw. So if it is a draw, we will look back at this video and I'll look like a genius. But yeah, so after about 40 minutes of video footage, we're not really coming to any sort of conclusion here, are we? Got one for you, one for Ben, and one for draw. We'll have to do a third video, gents. Then maybe we'll make up our minds. But we will leave it there. I hope we've all said what we wanted to. I'm sure we could talk more about Eubank. Obviously, has a new trainer who's worked with before in Bomac for this fight. There's other factors here or there, but we have run out of time. Elliot,
Good to see Bomac back in the UK. Just like to add that one.
Yeah.
Shout out, and shots fired to Beaumont. Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave that one there. Danny, Elliot, thank you both very much for your time. I'll speak to you again soon.
Cheers, mate.
Bye bye.